let's go to the NFL, of course. And Tom Brady, 44 years old, off to a great start, Rob. 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. They're 2-0. He's throwing for a bunch of yards. He was talking on, I believe, Sirius XM radio. And he was talking about the game. He started off talking about a lot of more of these running quarterbacks today than you usually used to see. And he talks about that and kind of says the reason he believes one reason, is because the game is a lot softer than it used to be. Here he is.
There's a lot of plays and hits that are happening on quarterbacks now that are flags for defensive players that probably weren't that way 10 or 15 years ago. So I'd say the game is a little softer than it used to be. I think the defensive players are more on the defensive when they go into tackle. And I think that's probably adding to this element of quarterbacks outside the pocket and taking more chances, than they did in the past.
Rob,
finally, I agree with Tom Brady.
Yeah,
finally.
Yeah, he's totally right. And I would throw this in, and it'll be interesting to hear what his thoughts would be on this. We always talk about this, Rob. This is a follow-up question. I think the reason he's able to play as long as he has and be as effective as he still is also due to what he said, the game being softer. They're protecting quarterbacks more than ever. He's not a mobile quarterback. All right, so back in the day, Rob, he would be taking some shots, even if they're not sacks. You know what I'm saying? Some of those hits that come after you release the ball, he would be getting leveled.
Go look at what the Giants did to Joe Montana, Chris.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Go look at what the Giants did to Joe Montana. Smashed him. They smashed him. And back then you could do all that. And you're right. If you're a quarterback and you try to do some fancy move and you get out of the pocket and they hit you, you might get 15 yards tacked on it. Come on. I dare you to hit me. Hit me.
Well, you're absolutely right, because you're kind of just going to go get in the quarterback's way, and then you're waiting for him to slide, right? I think, or go out of bounds. Rob, I actually think it's unfair because it's all up to the quarterback. Like if the defensive backs or linebackers or whoever they are charging at him, but hesitant, right? Because you don't want to hit him as he's sliding, or you might get a penalty. But what if he doesn't slide?
What if he fakes like he's going down, Chris? All right, I'm a fake like I'm a slide.
There has to be a penalty against that. There has to
pop up and then keep going.
Check that out, because I hear you, Rob, because I've often thought about it. I wouldn't
you know what I mean.
A lot of people have thought about it.
You make the motion like you're going, like you're going to go down, and then you pop up and run and keep running.
But there has to be, Rob G. There has to be a rule against that.
I doubt it.
Because I would be doing it all the time. I have yet to see a quarterback do that. Have you seen anybody do it yet?
No, but it
would make sense. But yeah, you give yourself up. You can't do that. But there's other ways. You don't have to. You can be subtle with it. You know what I mean? You can slow down a little bit. Right? You slow down a little bit, and then take off. It is a big disadvantage for the defenders. And I think Brady, I agree with him, and I'm glad he actually acknowledged that. But I also think, Rob, that is also a reason, and we got to tell this to the young boys, because we know we have a lot of young listeners, right? And the young listeners, if they go to Pro Football Reference and they look at the stats of Roger Staubach, one of the greatest quarterbacks ever, Terry Bradshaw, 4-time Super Bowl champion,
these guys were
Joe
terrible.
Namath. Right.
These guys were terrible.
Real talk. If you judge them by today's standards, you would be like, what? Joe Namath, who is a legend, threw Rob 50 more picks than touchdowns.
Right.
He got 220 interceptions and 173 touchdowns.
But
almost all of his years, he threw more touchdowns or more picks than touchdowns.
But Chris, you also looked up. I remember once there are guys, quarterbacks, who had 12 touchdowns all year in the air.
Absolutely.
12, 14 there were 14 touchdowns and 8 picks. That was their season numbers.
And you know who just did that? Andy Dalton in Dallas last year.
Is that what he had?
Yeah, 14 and 8 in his, that was the whole season, but obviously only started about half the year, or a little more than half
but
the
you
year.
know what I mean? Like those numbers that's what guys did. They ran the football. Jim Brown, the runners were way big of a part of the game. You threw on third down, Chris, when you couldn't make the 8 yards on a pass, or you're asking for too much. And when you can't make it on the run, so you go like, we got to pass. It's third down and 8. Anything more than 6, and you got to pass. It's like a hit at blackjack. There's a certain number. You got to take a hit.
Yep. And you mentioned Roger Staubach, Rob, 1976 Pro Bowl season for him, and this is right smack dab in the middle of his prime. 14 touchdowns, 11 picks.
See? That's exact. That was a Pro Bowl year.
Right. Completed 56% of his passes. Now, here's the thing. They were getting hit, as we said, a lot more. Quarterbacks were not nearly as protected as they are today. So that's one of the things. Rob, the receivers were getting hit, right? You go across the middle, your lights could be put out. Remember, Darryl Stingley got paralyzed.
Right.
Off a hit by George Atkinson, I believe, from the Raiders.
Yeah, that was that was ugly, man.
And I was a kid playing football and, thinking about that, like, wow, this dude.
I know that was part of why I never got to play football. My mom
Your
was
mom
against
wouldn't let
it.
you?
Wouldn't let me.
Yeah.
Nope. Because back then it was about kids being paralyzed in football. You see it on the news and you read about it, and she was like, I can't do it.
Right.
That was her thing to me.
So
I wanted to be a wide receiver. I was tall. I could catch, Chris. You know what I did? I wanted to play.
Right. Yeah, you definitely were tall, and that would have been an advantage. So it was just a different game. So don't look at the numbers of these guys and compare them to today's players and say, oh, they were no good. Remember there was actually a reporter, Rob, who did that a couple years ago with Ryan Fitzpatrick and put up that Ryan Fitzpatrick had more touchdown passes than Troy Aikman. Troy Aikman was great. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer.
Right.
You don't put him in the same sentence as freaking Ryan Fitzpatrick.
I don't care what his numbers are. Exactly.
Right.
I don't care.
It's
a totally different game. He had Emmitt Smith there, Chris, who ate up a lot of touchdowns because he could score in the red zone from there, right? He didn't have to throw the ball in every time. You don't have a running back now. You don't have guys like that. Not everybody has a running back who can get in, like an Aaron Jones. And what did Aaron Rodgers do, Chris? Like instead of a handoff, you just flip him the ball. It's almost the same exact thing.
The passes are like handoffs now, right?
It really is.
It was routine for the best running backs in the league, and there was several that were getting the ball 20 to 30 rushes a game.
Yes.
Like Derrick Henry, it was 5 guys getting that many carries in the league every weekend. And so
it was about like Barry Sanders, not about the quarterback for the Lions. Am I right? It was Barry.
Absolutely. Oh, the running backs I would say the running backs were the bigger stars.
Right.
Some quarterbacks too, but running backs were the huge stars, and they won a lot of the MVPs. Like now it's pretty much all quarterbacks.
And now it's all
I'll say this too, Rob. Remember, because I used to watch all of those highlight, videos like football, those not documentaries, but hour long.
From the frozen tundra, like those things with John Fresenda. Like Chris, like you couldn't, the guy had the greatest voice and the way with the marching music, boom, 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 and the frozen tundra of Green Bay, the Philadelphia Eagles marched in.
Field.
Right.
Yes,
it was great.
No, it was awesome. But they used to, Rob, some of the hits back then, most of the hits in those highlight videos are illegal now. Right? And I love the hits. I mean, I want the guys to be safe, obviously. But so many of those great hits that we grew up watching, Rob, have been taken out of the game. So these are all the reasons that I do think it's part of why you have more running quarterbacks. I think there's been a change in philosophy, and people are also more open to it. But I think that also the fact that you're not going to take the shots that you would have taken back in the day. I also think that's a part of why Tom Brady and other players are able to play much longer, because they're not taking as many hits either. So, and finally, as Rob and I pointed out, the statistics. And that's where, you young bucks who look at the old heads like they couldn't throw. They didn't know what they were doing.